item 60. It's the last item. We have some people that have signed up to speak on this item. You want to call it?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, item number 60 is case C14-2016-0063.sh at 4507, 4511 Vinson Drive. Planning Commission did recommend this case to you for SF6 COMP combined district zoning. It's ready for first reading action. I want to point out there is a memo from me in collaboration with the Transportation Department, Austin Transportation Department, Austin Parks Department, and Real Estate Services. Speaks to the traffic study. The preliminary engineering report would cost approximately $100,000 to conduct, and there's some information on what would be contained in that. Converting the railroad segment to an urban trail. This segment has been identified as an urban trail master plan as a Tier 1 trail. At this time, the rail segment is owned by the Union Pacific. The Urban Trails program is in discussion with Capital Metro about sharing the possible purchase of the land and or easement for a future trail, but no funding has been allocated. As far as purchasing the tract, I think there was some discussion about purchasing it for parkland or a trailhead. We've contacted the Real Estate Services Office and inquired about funding, as well as the Parks and Recreation Department, and neither department was able to source funds for the actual purchase of this. And then finally, the program improvements. What program improvements are proposed for Vinson Drive? And currently there are no improvements planned for Vinson Drive. Sidewalks are absent along Vinson Drive, and they're designated as a medium priority in the Austin Sidewalk Master Plan. ATD staff, led by the Active Transportation, have committed to a further study of available right-of-way is necessary to understand the opportunities for any future improvements to Vincent Lane. ATD manages the local traffic management program, which is a request-based program to address speeding in residential streets, but to date, an application has not been received for Vinson Drive.
Okay, thank you.
And so with that, I'll just pause, and if you have questions.
Okay, we have speakers to speak to. Ms. Kitchen, do you want to hear the speakers first? Or if you have a question, go ahead and ask.
Thank you, and thank you for the memo. I just had a couple of follow-up questions on the memo. So with regard to the second item, the urban trail item, so I understand that the land is still, I think it's saying here that have to be bought from Union Pacific. But my question is, do we know yet whether the bond funding could be used for that, assuming other hurdles were? And I know there's a lot of decisions to be.
There's ATD and see if they can address that.
Yeah.
Anna Martin, Transportation. Yes. I'm not sure of an exact answer to that,
okay.
Although negotiations with Union Pacific historically take a good portion of time. So with the goal of implementing this bond in 8 years, I'm not sure if that's feasible or not.
Okay. But I guess what I'm hearing is if that were to work out in terms of negotiating with, with Union Pacific, and if this project was of the level, the priority level to be funded, then it does fit within the parameters of the bond, I think, because it's designated as a trail, right?
Yes, it is a Tier 1 urban trail, so it does fall in the parameters.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify that. Then the second question I think is for you also. In terms of the $100,000 to pursue the traffic study, is that something that we have funding for now? What would it take to actually get that done?
We don't have those monies identified right now.
Okay.
It's possible we could piece something together between ATD, Public Works, and possibly some of the urban trails funding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the speakers. First, the applicant. Is the applicant here? You have 5 minutes.
Mayor, I have some donated time from Gus Pena, Linda Guerrero, And Jerry Paralysis. I won't need all of it, but just in case, I want to make sure that was there.
Okay.
Last week, first of all, Mayor, council members, thank you. I want to apologize ahead of time. I have a cough that's getting worse as the night goes on. I went through my slides last week, so I don't want to spend time doing those again. I did have additional slides I didn't show you last week, so I'll quickly go through those. But really, I want to spend time today just to give you my perspective. I realize that there's always more than one perspective. I just want to share with you some of the ironies that I've come across and just, my perspective. So the additional slides I have, if for later we could look at these, but the 80% MFI chart, impervious cover chart, and the South Austin Combined Neighborhood Plans upgrades for the Vinson Road area, and I'll refer to those later. And then finally, this is the SF3 subdivision. And then finally, I was thinking creatively with my architect, and we can talk about this during question and answer, but I've thought of maybe another way forward with the trailhead. But I don't want to focus on that now. I want to give you my thoughts, as I said. So, a great American philosopher, John Stuart Mill, once said that in every debate, both sides are right in what they affirm and wrong in what they deny. That is to say that it's about proportionality. And the truth lies somewhere in between, not in the middle, somewhere in between. And it's your challenge tonight to decide which side of the middle these two options before you lie. On the one hand, it's a pretty generic 8 big lot with 8 big box subdivision. Not that creative, but not terrible. And on the other, also 16 units, but the most responsible development I could put together under the SMART housing program and under the Imagine Austin. We have a representative democracy for a reason, so that the vocal voice of the few don't take away from the greater good, and also so the majority doesn't go stampeding off a hill. Whichever way you decide, like I said, it'd be your challenge to determine which does the greater good, but I will respect your decision. In December, your commissioners, the people who are the professionals, tasked, the technocrats that know code and engineering, agreed with city staff that this was the better option, and they added additional conditions to inextricably link my development with this zoning change, because the zoning change really came about because I wanted to build a pocket neighborhood, not the other way around. So they put additional protections there that basically allow me to do much like an SF3 development, but with the courtyard layout. Buildings, homes facing each other, sharing either a common drive or communal green space. I noticed last week that it seemed like there was some wavering, and none of the facts have changed. The engineering drawings haven't changed, but I can appreciate that at this level it can get political. And I know that many of you are doing the good people's work and probably having to suffer some political capital for it, and I can appreciate that. I respect that. I hope, though, that my project doesn't suffer because of it, and hope you agree with me that every case before you has to stand or fall on its own merits. The only thing I can think of that the opposition is so adamant on opposing this, because I don't see the facts in any way or form being on their side, is that they want to protect the SF3 designation. It's ironic that the SF3 designation in 18 months will be gone. We won't have those 2 letters and a number. And I know a lot's been said about affordability, but I think the fact that we have a fairly inflexible code is one of the reasons we're having these affordability issues. I'll remind you that it's 40% impervious cover, 40% impervious cover, but with SF3, you can only build one structure. And so 8 big lots, 8 big boxes. It's not very imaginative. I think Austin can do better. And With this option, you get the smaller, multiple structures sharing the same impervious cover. I appreciate the fear that the opposition has with the neighborhood changing, but the truth is that their affordable lots, their big lots, are also found affordable by builders. And builders will buy an affordable lot, scrape the affordable building, and put a big one on there. So we have to compare not what's there, but what could come. How do we want to funnel the market forces that are affecting all our neighborhoods? Is it with this blocky, kind of uncreative method, or something better? Under this current code, this is the best option, the most flexible option I have. And I want to dispel something that was said last week, that this is spot zoning or doesn't belong in the middle of the neighborhood. I'll say it's not spot zoning, it's single family, heavily modified again to be much like SF3, but with the ability to microsite. And also, I am not really in the middle of the neighborhood. When I bought these disparate lots 2 years ago, smashed on one side against a dead rail spur, on another against Vinson Road and a live railroad track. The city was actually trying to sue one of the owners before me because they were so neglected. I spent thousands of dollars cleaning them up from trash, shrubs and thorns. And I'm not on 5th Street. I have no access to 3rd Street. I'm literally on the edge of the neighborhood. I am right next to a big church complex, which is in the South Austin Combined Neighborhood Plan designated transition zone, which it itself is right next to the hospital district. So I am by definition that edge of neighborhood that requires creative thinking for urban infill. One of the ironies that I'm struggling with is that, and I don't want to be crass when I say this, but there's one commonality. The win that's on both of them is mine. And I don't want to sound that way, but what I'm trying to point out is that I'm not coming to you as a developer under duress or under leverage. I'm not trying to negotiate 70-foot towers against 80 and swap 1-1 affordables. I appreciate the concern expressed with some of these other talks today on the lack of family rental, affordable rentals. That's the only ones I have. I only have 2, but imagine if every developer came to you with this option. You would have Imagine Austin. If you deny this development, not only will you lose these 2 affordable family rentals, but what would you gain? The preservation of a code designation that won't even exist in 18 months. Before I close, I want to share with you why I found the smart housing program attractive to me. I think this is important to say this on record. In the ocean of uncertainty that is greenfield development, and as you can see, I was blindsided by a risk, that I didn't identify. Developers are they gravitate to any prescriptive method. So last February, we met with the smart folks, and I read the whole packet before I went, and they sold me right away. Because why else would you not want to build this way? It's just smart as it's intelligent. But it was a prescriptive method. They stated, you do this, this, and this. This is the best we have to codify, implement Imagine Austin. This is the kind of neighborhoods we want to build. And I agree with that. And you will get our buy-in, and you will even get a fast track. I find the latter a little bit comical because it's been a year. But the truth is that I was really drawn to it. And I wanted to do this right. I want to go over what smart really means. It's safe, multi-tenant, accessible, reasonably priced, and transient-oriented. Now, one of the opposition last week mentioned that I have a walkability score of 25. Well, that's because I haven't gotten in there to fix it. Their own neighborhood plan, the South Austin Combined Neighborhood Plan, identifies, and this is in the backup slides that I have, several upgrades that need to be done on Vinson Road. Primarily, it is a designated bike feeder route with no bike lane. It also needs a lot of sidewalks, as was mentioned, and they point out where they're needed, and some sections are right along my land. Good luck getting the city to give you those, at least in reasonable time. If you let me do this development, I will do my part, in the plans already drawn is a sidewalk along Vinson Road on the land that I control, that I abut, and also a bike lane. And if this neighbor to the south of me allows me to finish the 50 feet that he controls to Philco, I will literally have a bike lane from my sidewalk from my development to Philco, which is an internal neighborhood street that goes to 5th Street, where there's a bus station, and I am 1/4 mile. I needed to be 1/4 mile according to the SMART rules, and I just made it. So that is safer. It is transient oriented. As far as accessible, I have sidewalks within the development. I have American for Disabilities Act compliance, which I don't need to do with the default method. It's green. Besides green building, it is an order of magnitude better in flood mitigation. Besides a better design, it will be maintained by an HOA, whereas you don't get that when you get just lots. Reasonably priced. Besides the family affordable units that I mentioned, by nature of the structures being smaller, they will be more reasonably priced as compared to the other option. I get that the neighborhoods are changing and maybe not as compared to what's out there, but you have to compare new build to new build, what's coming. In all, the setbacks, five times to 2.5 times better. It's 25 feet all around versus 5 and 10 feet. In every way possible, I feel like this is a better alternative. It is the most responsible development I can bring you. At the end of the day, I can only bring you the options. I will respect whatever you choose. Again, I just want to close with, it's a representative democracy for a reason. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ray Collins. David King is here. Margaret Dunn. You have 9 minutes, Mr. Collins.
This thing's working great this week. My name is Ray Collins. I'm a member of the South Manchac Combined Neighborhood Plan Contact Team. I'll begin with a synopsis of what I said last week. The staff report recommending SF6 upzoning did not establish a conditional use, thus violating our neighborhood plan and zoning principle number 3 in the staff report, which states that zoning should be consistent with an adopted neighborhood plan. Expanding on the site-specific limitations of the Vinson Drive location I mentioned at this point in my talk last week, I call your attention to the Is It 16 handout. It first illustrates the point at which the vehicles from the 16 condominiums proposed in the developer's SF6 application will be entering Vinson Drive. Taking into account there are now staff comments on the developer's preliminary SF3 application, the remainder of the handout moves from the hypotheticals provided us by Wendy Rhodes last fall and reflected in the preliminary SF3 application to site-specific features in order to arrive at an estimate of 6 attached duplexes, 12 households. If this incompatible zoning is granted, the progressive densification process I described last week is underway. The precedent set by this initial upzoning in our residential core will be established and will continue via what we have identified as vulnerable properties near the Vinson Drive development. The progressive densification caused by upzoning in our residential core destroys the neighborhood by making the adjacent SF3 properties owned by the long-term residents less affordable, their median household income being $48,929. I ask you again to support our ballot petition signed by 54% of our neighbors adjacent to the proposed Vinson Drive development. Our neighbors consider SF3 zoning a win. The contact team voted to support the ballot petition. There are two things going on here. The larger group is the contact team, which voted to support the ballot petition. You'll find that letter on page 93 of the staff report to the Planning Commission. Our small group voted for that. There they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, and me. Now, our small group is also looking for, something more. And we don't expect the city to buy the land for us. We had hoped, yes, but it just didn't seem likely to us either. Now, that said, we're going to continue, our small group, we'll continue to look beyond and pursue our vision. To that end, I leave you with the green Vinson Drive win-win-win handout as one possibility and hope that council and their staff will continue working towards that goal with us with suggestions and help. As an example of help going forward with our plan, if council has experience with another nonprofit or legal entity which can hold the property and dedicate it to the uses we pursue, we would greatly appreciate hearing from you. To our small group, upholding the valid petition is an important step along the way to our ultimate goal of a pleasant green space along an urban trail and Bike Route 31. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker we have is Kate Mason Murphy, and then Larry. We'll go next.
Good evening. Larry Murphy's donating his time to me.
Okay, then you have 6 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Adler, Mayor Pro Tem Tovo, and City Council. My name is Kate Mason Murphy, and I'm part of the South Austin Combined Neighborhood Contact Team. It has come to our attention that we left you all confused last week. To be clear, the residents signed a valid petition against upzoning to SF6. They wish for this property to remain SF3. We had hoped that the intent of the postponement last week was to give all parties an opportunity to explore a much bigger vision for this property on the Bergstrom Spur. And like Ray said, that was our hope, and a week is not time enough to make that happen. But here are the facts we wish for you to consider. The South Austin Combined Neighborhood Plan is fresh. It was only available up for amendment this past November. Vinson Drive is dangerous, narrow, no bike lanes for Bike Route 31, and no sidewalks. And so far, no relief in sight from the city. This proposed development sits 4 blocks uphill of 16 homes on the Williamson Creek flood buyout, including my own home. The developer's SF6 plan is for 16 units with a 50% impervious cover. And given the weird shape and a 5-foot drop between the 2 lots, a large heritage tree at the south end, and the Bergstrom Spur right-of-way, we do not believe that it's even possible to get a 16-unit SF3 property, even if it's approved. Maybe 12 or 14, and that would be at 45% impervious cover. So that would be answering your question from last week, Councilmember Garza. This development should not qualify, in our opinion, for smart housing, given that it's based on an 80% MFI of $62,000, when the surrounding neighborhood has an MFI of $48,000. That's not affordable in our mind, nor does it connect anywhere. The T being transit, there's no transit. The sidewalk wouldn't connect to anywhere, even if he could attach it to Philco to go into the neighborhood. It wouldn't connect to St. Elmo. This development does not preserve our neighborhood's character. And I was listening to you, Mayor Adler, talk on Plaza Saltillo, and infill development, we agree, should occur on the corridors and not in the middle of a solidly SF3 neighborhood. This proposed development does not increase mobility in the city or in our zone, nor does it benefit the existing community at all. And the most responsible development is no development. That said, I urge you to uphold the valid petition and vote against upzoning to SF6. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Does the applicant want to close? One more speaker? Why don't you come on down? I didn't have you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. My name is William Hodge. I'd initially signed in to donate my time to Mr. Castino, but he said I could take it back. Again, my name is William Hodge. I am Mr. Castino's architect, and I am the person who initially helped him with the initial land planning of this development. I am a frequent architect and consultant of infill developers. And I also live in this council district, and I live about a mile east of this piece of land. I'm here to speak on one specific issue, and that is there's a difference between the two options, keeping the zoning as it is and having the zoning go to SF6. If it stays SF3, it's going to be 8 lots, 16 duplex units. If it's SF6, it's going to be 16 units. If it's SF3, there's going to be 16 households worth of traffic. If it's SF6, there's going to be 16 households worth of traffic. Even some of my own clients who I've we talk amongst each other. It's a community. They're like, why is Tony going for SF6? Just do the easy thing, right? Just do what's going to be quick. From the very beginning, when Tony and I have talked about this development, Tony has said, I want to do something that I'm proud of. I'd like to try to do something that gives something to the community. And we understand, as Kate said, this would be a great candidate for no development. Mr. Agostino could have his land bought by the city and it could be turned into a park. And I think Mr. Guernsey came at the very beginning and said that is just not going to be a possibility. So what Mr. Agostino wanted to do was do a smart housing project that was going to be good. I also want to close, since I do so much development work, and talk about the question of gentrification and property values. Under its current zoning, we can make this into 8 lots. They can have 16 duplexes. They're zoned the same as the lots behind them and to the south on Philco and South 3rd. We're creating comparables. It is the SF3 development that is legal without any further zoning change here that is going to change neighboring property values. What we're proposing is a 16-unit single-family detached condominium project. And when my clients, developers, and a lot of these developers, they're not going to compare. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
The applicant want to close? Okay. I need a motion to extend past 10 p.m. Someone want to make that motion? Ms. Garza makes that motion. Is there a second? Mr. Kassar. Those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? The question was, those in favor of extending past 10, raise your hand. Those opposed? Ms. Alter is opposed. I think we should give this election to Ms. Alter and then read the paper tomorrow. The meeting's extended 10 to 1. We'll finish the debate. We're back up to the dais.
Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to move passage at SF6, maintain the 16-unit cap, but remove the ADU restriction.
It's been a motion to go to SF6, maintain the 16 cap, remove the ADU restrictions.
And I can explain that second part.
Is there a second to that motion? Troxler.
So I think that I really appreciate the neighbors' work on this. I appreciate the concern that this could lead to other cases, but ultimately we have to take cases on each case-by-case basis. And I think that SF6 is generally a reasonable way for us to develop on multiple parcels and multiple acres for residential infill, and so it seems to me to be a reasonable request, and that the neighbors don't have too much of an objection to increased traffic or other issues. It's just a domino effect question, and I respect that, and we'll keep an eye on that, especially as we do the rewrite of the full code and map the full code. And the reason that I included the ADU question and issue is I want to leave it up to developers and developments. In SF6, you're allowed to do ADUs. That if one of these condominium units wants to have an ADU, that's fine, but that would reduce the number of units the number of other condos available. So ultimately, my motion does not increase the number of units. I just don't want to start having the Planning Commission see us restrict ADUs sort of unnecessarily. I don't see what the ADU restriction necessarily does on this case.
Ms. Kitchen?
I have a concern about removing the ADU restriction. And the reason for that is that that's not what this developer is asking for. It's not the ADU, if I'm understanding correctly, ADUs are not what's being contemplated as part of this development. What we're being asked to consider is something that's really, what we're being asked to consider is something that could be considered better than what could happen without this kind of change. I don't think ADUs is a component of that. And I think reducing the ADU restriction introduces an element that's really way beyond the neighborhood plan. So while I may end up, while I can support what's being proposed, and I know, and I'll explain why, I know this is not necessarily what the neighborhood wants. While I can support what's being proposed as a development, I cannot support reducing the ADU restriction off of it.
Mayor.
Mr. Cassar?
I guess I just want to get some clarity. Right now, under the SF3 zoning on that site, ADUs are allowed.
But what I'm suggesting is that I don't want to mix and match.
Okay.
Oh, do you want?
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, I'm sorry. To me, this is a very, to me, the only reason I would even consider going forward with what is being proposed is because it's very confined. It's very confined in the way that it's designed, and it's designed in a way that to my mind, is consistent with the neighborhood plan, even though the SF3 label is different. So I don't want to be, and I won't be in a position of redesigning that. So I'm either going to go with what the neighbors are suggesting or support what the developer is suggesting. I don't think I don't consider it appropriate to try to change that.
Mr. Cassar?
As a practical matter, I recognize there's a valid petition on this case, and if to get to those 9 votes, we have to make that change, I would make that change to my own motion. I guess I would just want to make very clear that that the removal of the AD restriction is not to redesign the project, but rather to not get into the when we did all this work to make it so that ADUs were allowed in SF3 and SF4, SF5 and SF6, for us to not pick and choose too much about where ADUs are allowed and aren't allowed, but since we're just voting on this particular case, and it would require 9 votes to pass, I would be fine once we hear what the rest of the dais thinks, making that change if that's what it takes to get to 9 votes and to move forward tonight.
Scarlett?
I'm leaning towards where Councilmember Kitchen is on this. To me, the developer keeping it to 16 was a compromise, even though with SF6 they could have built more. They came down to that compromise trying to come to an agreement with the neighborhood. And I appreciate the answer that the neighborhood believes they can only build 14 and 15, but the developer says they can build 16. And so I still see this as 16 versus 16, and I'm having a hard time getting past. To me, it seems the biggest issue is the precedent it sets, but the reality is I said it last week, we cannot control what future councils do. So whether we set precedent here or not, there could be a future council and there could be 3 lots, but the reality is there are not, is it 4 lots? There are not 4 connected lots in this area right now. There's nowhere else really to create infill at this point. So I couldn't support SF6 with removing the ADU limitation.
Sorry, but again, to be really clear, removing the ADU restriction was not adding any new units because I kept the 16-unit cap in my motion. But if it's still an issue, because it sounds like it is, I'll remove it. But just to be clear, I maintain the 16-unit cap. It's just if one of the condos wants an ADU, then they could do that. They would just have to do one less condo. Does that make sense?
Mr. Kassar has offered to remove the...
I've offered to remove it, but I was just explaining that I was not adding new units.
It seems to change what they have. They have 2 site plans right now. They have one with SF3, or they have one, and so that would basically change the site plan.
It wouldn't change the site plan. The point would be to not be getting into the habit of passing things with ADU restrictions needlessly. But that's fine. I'll include it anyways.
Any objection to taking out the change in ADUs? Hearing none, that change is made in the motion. Continuing debate. Any further debate? Mr. Renteria.
I'd like to ask the staff a question. I hear that the concern was if, it's not as much with the project itself, was because of the SF3 going to SF6, then other people would buy the land next to it, and it'd be like a domino effect with SF6. Can you explain to me, is there a way to keep that from happening if this does pass?
Yes, council could not grant SF6 if that were to happen next door. I mean, you could have 4 property owners perhaps on joining the property, get together and sell all their lots to, I guess, a developer interest, and then have someone come in and ask for SF6. It would come back to you and for that consideration. Except I think the lots that are behind this actually would front a single-family neighborhood, the SF3 neighborhood, as opposed to this tract fronting on Vincent and the railroad tracks and a little bit of the church property. So there is perhaps a different context. But ultimately that decision would lie with council if there was a collection of lots that came in next door or nearby and somebody wanted to zone it for SF6.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. Kitchen?
Could you clarify the motion? What reading was it on?
First reading.
First reading, okay.
First reading. It's to approve SF6.
Okay.
Cap 16 units.
My thinking about this area is that I really respect and am excited by the vision that the neighbors have talked about. And to me, that vision depends primarily on getting the Bergstrom Spur, and then making improvements to that road. And to me, that makes a bigger impact on what is desired for this area. And so I think that I see some, there's a lot of hurdles, as we've talked about, but I think we need, regardless of what happens here, I think we need to work very hard, and I will commit to working with Councilmember Renteria, and I know he's been doing this, to work on acquiring that Bergstrom Spur so that we can work on the effort of what could be a really, really wonderful vision there in terms of that that trail. So,
any further debate? Ms. Poole?
Yeah, I would like to see some work done to advance the Bergstrom Spur as well, and the additional safety concerns around the sidewalks and everything. I may abstain at this point and wait and see what comes back, so that we can have more definition on. And boy, it's late. I'm sorry. I'm just babbling.
Yeah, Ms.
I'm
Garza?
just going to stop right there.
Ms. Garza?
I'm sorry, I don't know if somebody addressed this. Does the SF6 configuration, it seems it's hard to tell from the diagrams, but it looks like SF6 gives you more room around that spur area as opposed to the SF3. It looks like if it's SF3, 16 units, it's pushed up a little bit towards the north of that. Is that right?
So obviously, if it's 8 lots, you just are going to be blocked. You can't do anything. That would be. Could you put the additional slides? There's no way if it's 8. Those would be 8 individual owners with their own rights. With the condominium regime, it's 16 families, but they co-own everything else. So you just own your house, but the rain gardens, everything else the land is shared. And so one of the things that I was exploring with the architect, and we only had time to sketch it, so it's not that great, was to move one of the houses, swap it with the parking to have more contiguous green space. And I was offering that as the trailhead. And if I could put that up. So all inside that red oval, there's no buildings. I know it's complicated because they're essentially rain gardens, depression zones for water collection, but it's all landscaped, essentially, green space. The trees there, again, shared space. There would be, like I said, a bike path just a few meters that would take you to the trail. So that could be the trailhead. Like I said, I moved some stuff around to do that. I mean, like I said, I'm willing to make that. I like that vision. I'm willing to help with that. I think your best option when you have a condominium regime is that the HOA determines what you do with that space. And I've already promised the Southwood Neighborhood Association that they would have a say in those covenants and how they're drawn, the HOA covenants. With 8 individual lots, you lose that because there's no way that an owner is just going to give away his land, you know. But this land would be owned by 16 families, and that HOA board would decide what to do with it. And again, that's a pretty good chunk of land right there. I think it would make a good trailhead. Anyways, just an offer there.
Okay, and I guess it seems like under the condo regime, it's more conducive to the ability to use that land for a trailhead.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's your only shot at it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So let me ask a question about, just as a follow-up question. So could you not put that in as a requirement that it be used for a trailhead if a trail became available, as opposed to leaving it up to the condo owners to make that decision? I don't know exactly how that
If you have that power,
works.
I would accept that. Sure.
I don't know what if we have the authority to do that or who would have the authority to do that. But rather than leaving it to the condo owners once they own this, if this is one of the reasons that we're going forward with this kind of approach, because it gives us it actually gives us the possibility of a trailhead,
sure,
I would want to nail that down if that's possible.
Yeah,
Wait,
I honestly don't know.
Yes?
Yeah.
Councilperson Kitchen, this land also is undergoing a plat, and there can be an access easement written as part of the plat that would, could dedicate that use. So we were just talking back there about that. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Further discussion? We have a motion on the table. Let's take a vote. Those in favor on first reading?
I had another
I'm
question
sorry, Ms. Houston.
to staff, and you may have said this, but how much does it cost to acquire the Bergstrom Rail Spur?
I don't know if we have an estimate for that, but before we come back for second, third reading, we can try to have maybe a guesstimate of what it might cost per, I don't know, how many linear foot or whatever that distance is.
Yeah.
But we'll see if we can find an estimate cost and try to give that to you.
Okay. They ready to take a vote? Vote is passed on first reading. Those in favor, please raise your of SS6, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Pool, Renteria abstain. The others voting aye. Truck? I'm sorry. Abstain. 3 abstentions. The others voting aye. Truck, Claire. Did you vote? How'd you vote? Yes. The vote is 8-0-3 with the 3 abstentions. It passes on first reading. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, does it pass? I thought we had a valid petition.
It's only on third reading.
This is first reading.
All right.
That's all the things that we have on our agenda. Oh, is anybody here to speak on Austin Oaks? Well, that's good to hear. This meeting stands adjourned.